Did you know that in the 14th century, an entire fortified town was reportedly brought to ruin by a mole, not a spy, not a saboteur, but a literal underground swelling rodent? It sounds absurd, like something out of a dark Monty Python sketch, and yet, somewhere between the crumbling stone walls and the dusty records of medieval Europe, this tale lingers. Welcome back to Mysteries of Old, the place where lost history, forgotten myths, and the weirdest corners of the past come alive. In today's episode, we journey into a strange but true event where superstition, law, and absurdity collided in one tiny creature. A mole, a burrowing animal, blamed for disaster. But beneath the laughter is a deeper story about how medieval societies thought about justice, guilt, and control, and how sometimes, in the darkest moments, people needed something or someone to blame. So grab your torch and step back with me into the damp tunnels of medieval Europe. The year is uncertain, the town's name is mostly lost to time, but the records that survive are enough to spark wonder and confusion. In the Holy Roman Empire, somewhere within what is now modern-day Switzerland or Alsace, a fortified town found its outer walls compromised, not by siege, not by fire or flood, but by the slow, unseen labor of burrowing moles. Over time, the soil beneath the town's walls had been loosened, the stonework cracked. One by one, foundations shifted, and eventually, the great defenses meant to repel armies began to give way. Blame turned not to engineers or weather or poor craftsmanship, it turned to nature. Or, more precisely, to the mole. Or moles, plural. In the legal customs of medieval Europe, animals could be put on trial. Yes, real trials. With legal representation, judges, verdicts, and sentencing. And so, as absurd as it sounds, a mole was summoned to court. To modern ears, the very idea is ridiculous, but in the Middle Ages, animals were routinely tried for crimes. Rats were accused of theft and property damage. Pigs stood trial for attacking children. Locusts were excommunicated by bishops for destroying crops. These weren't metaphorical cases. Think were formal, public, often lengthy affairs. Why? Because in the eyes of the church and many legal systems, animals were part of God's creation, and if they committed evil, justice demanded a response. Some trials even required the defendant animal to appear in court. In one 15th century case, rats were summoned and given multiple chances to appear. Their lawyer argued that they were too afraid to travel safely, since cats roamed the roads. You can't make this up, except it is made up, and also somehow completely true. Moles' destructive actions came to light. A tribunal was formed. Witnesses were called. Legal texts were cited. Tess, the mole, however, did not attend. This wasn't just theater. It's in a world where life was short, brutal, and often inexplicable. People needed structure. They needed meaning. And they needed someone to blame when things fell apart. A crumbling wall could be seen as divine punishment, or the work of the devil, or the sin of a burrowing animal. Putting the mole on trial served a psychological purpose. It gave the townspeople a sense of control, a villain they could name, a process they could follow. And ironically, it reinforced the idea that even the smallest wrongdoer wasn't beyond the reach of justice. Whether or not a sentence was carried out is unclear. Did they execute a mole? Did they issue a symbolic banishment? Maybe they placed a curse on all moles within a day's ride. The records trail off, but the story survived. This wasn't an isolated incident. In 1386, in the French town of Falaise, Kay was dressed in human clothing and publicly executed for killing a child. In 1519, a group of weevils were brought to court in France for destroying vineyards. The court appointed them a lawyer. After lengthy proceedings, The weevils were eventually granted a small plot of land as compensation and were politely asked to leave the vineyards alone. Medieval justice was deeply ritualistic, highly symbolic, and, in hindsight, often absurd. But it reveals something real about human nature, our need to make sense of the world, even when the world makes no sense at all. So the next time you see a molehill in your garden, imagine being a medieval farmer watching your walls collapse, not from enemy forces, but from the silent, patient labor of an unseen mole. In a time before scientific explanations, before structural engineering, before pest control, sometimes a mole was a monster. And monsters, in the world of mysteries of old, always have stories worth telling. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time as we dig into another strange corner of forgotten history.